make it look like something that has occurred from nature. And again, I hope it's not the case, but based on past evidence, and you can look into MK Ultra, you can read Poisoner in Chief by Sidney Gottlieb. This is all public information. You can see the type of shit that the CIA has been willing to do to innocent civilians and agents from other countries, nonetheless. So it's not crazy to think that another country is doing the same thing to us. And it's, I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but that's my thought on that headline, that 20-minute extrapolation. What are my thoughts on Havana Syndrome and that excerpt? Maybe there's some pernicious shit going on. The next thing I want to get into, which is somewhat related because it does involve symptoms and the health of people, although this is the health of billions of people, not just hundreds. There is an article on WSU Insider, Washington State University Insider, and it's titled WSU's to lead a $125 million U.S. aid project to detect emerging viruses. Again, the title of this article is WSU to lead a $125 million U.S. aid project to detect emerging viruses, and these are coronaviruses. And in short, this is a program that is greenlit by Biden to study and create samples and to create strains of coronaviruses, like the one that was just released. Sorry for picking my nose. To create strains of coronaviruses like the one that was just, released into the world, COVID-19. There's a shit ton of evidence that suggests it was leaked from a lab with horrible safety procedures. And there's also a lot of evidence that shows that COVID-19 was brought into this world by gain-of-function research, which is essentially scientists supercharging viruses to make them much more dangerous than they are in a very small amount of time in order to study the effects of what would happen if a virus like this was released or got out into the human population. And by using gain-of-function research and supercharging the COVID-19 virus, supercharging coronaviruses, they're basically running them hundreds and thousands of times through animals and are not in control of the adaptations of the virus. It seems like the virus got out of the lab in Wuhan through gain-of-function research and is now part of the world. And instead of putting the brakes on gain-of-function research and saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be taking these naturally occurring viruses and making them 1,000 times more dangerous than they are, maybe we should put the brakes on that. Maybe we should put in some more regulations. Maybe we should spend the next few years stepping back from gain-of-function research and just kind of looking at what's going on in virology labs across the world and updating safety and procedures so that this never happens again. Instead of doing that, here's an excerpt from the article on what exactly is happening. Instead, the goals are ambitious. It is to collect over 800,000 samples in the 5 years of the project, most of which will come from wildlife, then to detect whether viruses from the target families are present in the samples. When those are found, the researchers will determine the zoonotic potential of the viruses or the ability to transfer from humans to animals and animals to humans. This process is expected to yield 8,000 to 12,000 novel viruses, which researchers will then screen and sequence the genomes of the ones that pose the most risk to animal and human health. So this involves gain-of-function research. To me, I don't know what to think. It's absurd that we basically caused a global pandemic, and I recorded an entire episode on the COVID lab leak that's available on Auxoro Premium. You can also listen to people on Joe Rogan. You can listen to Brett Weinstein. There's a ton of great articles out there as well, published by, you know, trustworthy sources, and they list the sources in the articles to back it up that this indeed, the virus looks like it almost certainly leaked from the lab in Wuhan, China, and this came from gain of function research. This whole lab leak theory that used to be kind of like woo-woo, hand-wavy, if you believe this, you're a conspiracy theorist. Thanks to Jon Stewart making the joke about it on Colbert, and pushing through the liberal media block, that kind of like refusal to acknowledge that this could have been from China. And by the way, the United States is guilty in all of this, because we were funding this research in Wuhan. It was actually banned. Gain of function research was banned in the US, and we went through a ton of loopholes, breaking points with Crystal and Sagar actually has a ton of great videos on this about exactly how the United States and Fauci in particular was involved in exploiting loopholes and going through third-party organizations to fund gain of research in the lab in Wuhan, China. And that led to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. So what does it say about this administration, not just Biden, but the government in general, that in response to a virus that has killed thousands of people, millions of people at this point, has hospitalized millions more, will likely be a virus that stays with us, probably like the flu. What does it say about our government that in response to what caused that, we are going to now put $125 million to do the same thing that led to this pandemic? We're going to actively try to cultivate novel coronaviruses through gain of function research that we obviously don't know how to control. And this is not the first time. COVID-19 is not the first time a virus has leaked from a lab. Viruses leak from labs all the time, through labs specifically that conduct gain of function research. This is just one that led to a global pandemic. And so you would think, the U.S. Has a history of this where something happens and you think the response would be okay. Like with school shootings, you would think that if a 16-year-old kid shoots up a school, that guns would be restricted in ways that would make it extremely hard for someone like that to get access to them again. Again, I'm not against the Second Amendment at all. I think people should absolutely have the right to own guns, but there are loopholes that can be exploited, and there are ways in which teenagers can get their hands on very deadly weapons. And so you'd think that you would put many regulations in place to prevent this from happening. And yet there are still school shootings are still going on. They've slowed down during COVID, but it's like you would think that we would come up with a way to prevent a kid from bringing an automatic weapon to school and blowing other kids' heads off. But like it's still possible to do that. You would think when a virus leaks from a lab with gain of function research that causes millions of people to die and millions more to get sick, literally changes the face and the outcome of human history, you would think the first thing we would do would say, okay, gain of function research caused this. We don't have the control that we thought we had, so let's stop this until we have, let's stop this permanently, but at the very least, let's stop gain of function research until we at least have the sort of technology to have more control over the situation where viruses aren't just leaking from labs nonchalantly and working their way into the human population. And yet, there's now a $125 million project greenlit by the Biden administration to do exactly the thing that just caused this pandemic. And I wish I was more surprised, but I'm not even surprised anymore by some of the decisions that come out of government and the decisions that come out of our leaders. Because how the fuck is this not all over the New York Times? Why is this an article on Washington State University? Breaking Points did a video on this, which is how I found out about the article. But how is this not front page news that the thing that caused the pandemic, the thing that caused the lab leak, we are funding, we are putting money, $125 million into the thing that just caused the pandemic? That's like a group of terrorists flying into the World Trade Center in New York City and then giving money to the group of terrorists that just flew planes into our buildings. And we kind of did that when we went to war in Afghanistan. We made the Taliban stronger, and thousands of United States soldiers died, and we were there for 20 years, and a lot of pockets were stuffed, and people made a shit ton of money from arming this Afghan army that was supposed to be able to stand up against the Taliban that crumbled in months, days, weeks, whatever it was. And we indirectly made the Taliban stronger. So in a way, we funded the very people that destroyed the U.S. We are funding the very process which is destroying our planet, which is the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe we're going to get out of it, but why the fuck are we doing this? I wonder if it's some sort of self-loathing complex, but at a widespread governmental global level, like a self-loathing global complex that can be carried out at the national level. It's like, imagine if the United States was a person. And you all know people who have these complexes where they hate themselves and they actively think that they're doing something that will help. They think that by performing certain actions, they're actually helping themselves. But there's a complex running in the back of their head where they're actually causing their own demise. They're causing their own self-destruction. But in their heads, they actually think that they're doing good. And people from the outside can see this, but to the actual person, they have no idea. They're like, why is my life going terribly? Why did my wife leave me? Why did I lose my job? Why am I a fat piece of shit? I'm doing all these things to be a positive force in my life. Why am I doing this? But in what they're actually doing is they're giving themselves an out to fail. And they don't even realize it. They've convinced themselves to the point of delusion where they're actually helping. They've convinced themselves that they're actually making their lives better, when in reality, they're doing everything to cause their own demise under the guise of positive action. And so I think I have no idea. I didn't think that was possible, that sort of complex was possible. But maybe there's some sort of governmental global complex where, or a national complex that can have global effects, where essentially a country, a group of leaders, because I don't think that Biden is this evil person, or the Biden administration is this evil group of people that are like, let's fucking kill everybody. Let's, put $125 million into detecting emerging viruses and gain-of-function research that just led to the pandemic. I can't wait until the entire world burns. I don't think that the Biden administration is not thinking that, but they are doing an action that can cause the world to burn under the guise of positive action. And so it is kind of like this governmental complex where you're passing all this shit and you're waking up in the morning and you think you're doing really well and you think you're helping yourself out, you think you're helping your country out, and the very things that you think are helping are leading to the destruction of the people and the destruction of the country. So maybe it's some sort of complex. I don't know what the fuck could be the reason for doing something like this. Like, why do we need to supercharge viruses that are already deadly and make them 100 times more deadly in spans of time that we did not evolve to be able to handle? Why are we doing this shit? I don't fucking know. But hey, I'm not a politician, so fuck. Let's do something on a brighter note.